This course is designed for non-majors, but given the subject matter, inevitably we need to deal with some technical musical vocabulary. Music is an art of arranging sounds across time, and in most music, not everyday sounds, but specifically musical sounds that we call tones. You will often find people talking or writing about musical notes. Strictly speaking, a tone is a sound in the air, and all music includes sound, and a note is a mark on paper. Not all music is written down. In practice, most people use the terms interchangeably. When composers combine tones in succession, we call the resulting series a melody. When composers combine 3 or more tones simultaneously, we call the combination a harmony or chord. A relationship between only 2 tones is called an interval. If the relationship between tones is simple and stable, we call the combination consonant. If the relationship between tones is complex and unstable, we call the combination dissonant. In the 18th and 19th centuries, composers always wrote within a harmonic framework called a key, sometimes called a tonality. The key is an established collection of chords, all centering on the tonic chord. A tonic chord, and thus a key, can be either major or minor. Here's a typical chord progression in a major key. Here's the same progression in a minor key. Note the difference in sound. Now, here's where things start to get a little too interesting. In the 18th and 19th centuries, composers seldom restricted themselves to a single key, even within a single piece of music. So even though a piece might be titled Sonata in C minor, the whole piece is not in C minor. Any one movement is not just in C minor. It'll start in C minor, end in C minor, and in between it will go to at least one other key. When a composer moves from one key to another, the move is called a modulation. Here's an extension of that previous passage, modulating to another key. So we started with one chord as the tonic, but then finished with a different chord as the tonic. The move can be done very smoothly and elegantly in a short time because the chords are related. There are several keys that contain both of these chords. And this brings us to an important distinction. Any 2 keys share at least 2 tones, often more, and they may share 1 or more chords in common. Keys that share many common tones and chords are said to be nearly related. The modulation I demonstrated previously is a modulation between nearly related keys. Here's another. So I started on the same initial tonic chord, but but this time moved to a different ending tonic. Again, the modulation can be effected very quickly and smoothly because the two chords are closely related. There are several keys that contain both of these chords. Now, for contrast, here's a modulation between distantly related keys. It's not nearly as smooth and subtle as the previous modulations because the keys are so far apart. If you're going to move from one to the other gradually, it'll take longer to cover the metaphorical distance. Or, as demonstrated here, if you do it quickly, there's going to be a noticeable wrench. And it goes back to the fact that these two chords have nothing to do with each other. There is no key that contains both of these chords. So, to review, melody refers to tones strung together successively. Harmony refers to tones combined simultaneously. An interval is a relationship between two tones. If the relationship is simple, we call it consonant. If it is complex, we call it dissonant. A key is a collection of chords organized around a central tonic, which is either major or minor. A move from one key to another is called a modulation. If the two keys share many tones and chords in common, they are nearly related. If they share only a few tones in common, they are distantly related. Now comes the challenging part. In order to appreciate the drama of tonality in Beethoven's music, you need to know which keys are nearly related to each other and which are distantly related. There are 12 major keys and 12 minor keys. If you do the math, that adds up to 276 pairwise relationships. Rather than ask you to learn a list of 276 distances, I'll ask you simply to commit to memory the following diagram that illustrates the relative distances among the 24 keys. This is called the circle of fifths. In classical music, it's conventional to abbreviate major keys by simply listing their tonic as capital letters and minor keys as lowercase letters. The 12 major keys are arranged in the outer ring and the 12 minor keys in the inner ring. Now, I recommend that you approach this in 3 stages. First, learn the outer ring of the major keys. As you do this, keep track of those little symbols. The little B-shaped items are called flats, and B and B flat are 2 different entities. Don't confuse them. Likewise, the little thing that looks like a tic-tac-toe board is an abbreviation for sharp. F and F sharp are 2 different entities. G flat and F sharp inhabit the same space at the bottom because we regard them as equivalent. More on that later. For now, just learn this diagram. Memorize it. Make sure you've learned every symbol and that it's oriented exactly like this. C is at the top. Make sure that you can reproduce it entirely, absolutely accurately from memory. Once you've mastered that, you can move on to the inner ring, the minor keys. Again, keep in mind that B and B flat are 2 different tonics. F and F sharp are 2 different tonics. And again, E flat and D sharp inhabit the same space because they're equivalent. Learn all these symbols and make sure it's in this orientation with A at the top. Make sure that you can reproduce it entirely, absolutely accurately from memory. Once you've learned these, and if you've kept track of that orientation, then step 3 is a piece of cake. You just put the 2 together. The alignment is important because the keys that are radially aligned are closely related. So, for example, at the top of the diagram. C major and A minor share many of the same notes, and they're very closely related keys. Or at the 3 o'clock position, A major in the outer ring and F sharp minor in the inner ring are closely related keys. Don't be at all surprised if at least one quiz and exam in the future includes an incomplete version of this diagram, which I would ask you to fill in. Don't panic. This is not trivial. It's probably the most abstruse thing I will ask you to learn all semester. But it's invaluable because it gives us a way to concretize the sense of tonal distance, which we'll see Beethoven pushing past the boundaries of composers who worked before him.